Hi folks, the Filipina here. And for those of you involved with the Filipina or wanting to be, this will be a very useful video because I'm going to help you get to the bottom of our sometimes bizarre and puzzling behavior, at least from your perspective. Why do we do the things we do? Why is it so hard to predict our actions? And what do we really mean when we say the things we say? Why do we sit there with a smile on our face, then suddenly do a 180 and turn into a fire-breathing monster? Well, it's no secret that Filipinas are unusual creatures, an exotic mix of the familiar and unfamiliar. But if you know how to tame us, we're worth the trouble, most of the time. So today, I'm going to give you the keys to the kingdom by showing you what's going on in our heads. You might think you already know, but I assure you, you're about to hear some things you didn't expect. Now, I'm not going to list off a bunch of traits like being feminine, being low maintenance, and keeping our men happy, because those aren't the things that puzzle you. You're just happy we're like that. Instead, I'm going to be talking about some of the things that confuse you and the reasons behind it. Some of it good and some of it bad. At first glance, we seem to be such happy people, and while part of that is genuine, part of it isn't. But before I get started, let me once again explain that yes, I know I'm generalizing. I'm aware that every individual is unique, but there are definitely some common traits that anyone with a Filipino partner will recognize. To claim all women are the same, from an Egyptian housewife to a Mongolian nomad, is kind of silly, because it's more than just our biology that affects our behavior. So when you say, my Filipina's not like that, I'm not surprised. But in general, the following information will apply to the vast majority of Filipinas. So let's get started. One of the first things you'll notice when getting involved with a Filipina is the amount of attention you'll receive. Once you get on her radar and things seem to be going in the right direction, you'll probably be bombarded with texts and maybe even professions of love. She'll message you in the morning, she'll message you at lunch, and while you're still trying to remember her name, she'll be messaging you in the bathroom to be sure everything came out okay. Now, compared to where you come from, this all happens way too quickly, so it can't be real, right? It might even sound like the beginning of a love scam. So what's going on? Why do Filipinas do that? Well, it might seem a little childlike, but we're just trying to show you that you have our interest, and we're hoping we have yours. Love bombing you within the first few conversations seems ridiculous, but apparently the phrase playing it cool was never introduced to the Philippines. And if it was totally ignored. You'll also start receiving a million photos, which is an attempt to keep you looking at our face, so we become more than just words on a screen. We're hoping that by keeping constant contact, we can give the relationship a boost and speed it along. We might even introduce you to our kids, to our mom, and to our friends, much faster than it's customary to do in the West. And you can feel like you're on a speeding train you didn't buy a ticket for. But do we actually love you at this point? Well, to me, that's impossible. But we are in love with the thought of you and what the future may bring. So don't think of us as lying. Just think of us as being hopeful. At first, we might seem overly caring to the point you think that it has to be an act. But we're natural-born caregivers, and chances are, we're just trying to show you a taste of things to come. Now, once you start actually dating in person, you're gonna notice some other not-so-subtle differences. Along with keeping you tied up on the phone, we're unparalleled when it comes to mate guarding. A Filipina can smell a rival at a distance of 20 kilometers, and she'll do everything necessary to be sure that her competition never crosses your path. This includes, but is not limited to, physically attaching herself to your body so that there's no mistaking that you're together, and she'll quickly accept the job of zookeeper to make sure there's no opportunity for any monkey business. She figures that the more she's in your life, the less room there'll be for anyone else. Pure and simple. The strategy also becomes apparent when it comes to your living arrangements. A determined Filipina will insert herself into your apartment faster than a trip to Western Union. To her, living together is a surefire way to achieve an exclusive relationship, which is just the way she wants it. But why? What's the rush? Well, the Philippines isn't exactly the land of opportunity. So when it knocks, it's a lot better if you're already inside his house, so you can be the one that opens the door. It's all about making sure you aren't tempted by anyone else. And a Filipina will go to almost any lengths to prevent her prize from getting awarded to someone cuter or younger. She assumes you have many choices, and she's hell-bent on being your final pick. Now, everyone knows about a Filipina's jealousy, but what you might not know are the other ways it'll pop up. I hate to say it, but sometimes we can actually be jealous of your own kids, especially if we see a close bond between you and your daughter. I know this sounds kind of petty, but anyone that occupies a place in your heart is someone competing for your time and attention. And if you also happen to be providing material support to your child, it can become a bone of contention, which is hypocritical since she's almost always happy if you support her kids, or her family, or the neighbors. That's not to say she minds supporting your family in general, but I've seen many cases where a Filipina secretly resents your close relationship to your child. And this feeling of competition can even extend retroactively into the past. Woe is he that's caught with a keepsake from an old flame, or just a picture of her, even an ex-wife. To a Filipino, mentioning a past relationship might be strictly verboten, and both parties are supposed to pretend they're as pure as the driven snow. Besides avoiding the past, a Filipina might require constant assurances about the future. Out of the blue, she might say something like, "You'll never leave me, right?" Now, this can really surprise a foreigner, especially if you've never given your partner any reason to doubt you. And she might do it so often that it makes you suspicious about what's going on. But it's just the way we act sometimes. And if we sound like a neurotic, insecure mess, well, yeah, many of us are. So now that we've covered the jealousy and insecurity, let's talk about some of the other unusual behaviors that might have you perplexed. If you haven't already noticed, your Filipina might seem obsessed with your eating habits. In the Philippines, the standard greeting of hello is often replaced with, "Have you eaten yet?" That's because our culture revolves around family and food and family, and any gathering is gonna start with a meal. Even if you're not hungry, you better find a little space in your stomach because refusing food is a big no-no. Remember that episode of 90 Day Fiancé where the guy refused to try the lechon and his girlfriend had a meltdown? You might think that's an exaggeration, and maybe your reaction was a little over the top. But to avoid any public embarrassment, it's best to at least pretend to try the food. And that brings us to the next topic that greatly affects our behavior: the fear of embarrassment or ridicule. Now, I could probably write a book on this subject alone, but if you really want to understand your Filipina, this one's crucial. Much of our society is about shame, blame, and not calling attention to yourself. Of course, except when it comes to karaoke. And avoiding embarrassment is at the top of the list. For instance, one of the worst things you can do is to criticize someone's behavior in public. If you have a disagreement with your partner, do it in private. Getting into a shouting match is fine as long as it's at home and the neighbors couldn't hear it. But doing it in public will bring shame on you and embarrassment to her. And pointing out her shortcomings will quickly lead to the blame game. The national sport of the Philippines is finding anything or anyone that absolves us from taking responsibility for our mistakes. Our go-to response is, "It's not my fault," even when it's something as simple as leaving the butter out of the fridge. You might not understand why we get so upset when we're accused of even the most trivial things, and why we often seem so defensive. But that's the reason why. You will very rarely hear the phrases, "You're right," "my fault," or "I'm sorry," because those are admissions of guilt. So if you think you got a Filipina who's stubborn or too proud, now you know it's not just her. It's a cultural thing. Now, if someone from a higher status ridicules us, like a teacher, a parent, or an employer, we'll usually just shut our mouths and take it, at least until their backs are turned. But if it's someone of equal or lesser status, expect an immediate response. This constant fear of being judged can make us appear shy, especially in front of other people. I've heard from a number of guys whose Filipinas use English like a native speaker, but only when it's just the two of them. They go to dinner with friends and she barely says a word, but then they get home and she's spouting English like a language professor. It's because we think our English skills suck, and we're afraid people are gonna criticize our accent. So our solution is to say as little as possible. If you ever go to a gathering of mixed couples, you'll often see the Filipinas sitting at one table and all the foreigners sitting at another. Now, a lot of that is because the guys want to talk about guy stuff and the women want to talk about girl stuff. But it's also so that we don't have to embarrass ourselves with our horrible English. The fear of public ridicule also makes us very sensitive when it comes to our perceived status, like which restaurant we're seen eating at or whatever version of iPhone we own. Wearing brand name jeans is often more important than paying the rent, and it all comes down to appearances. In the Philippines, it's all about what it looks like, not what it really is. Image is everything, and sometimes that leads to some pretty hypocritical behavior. 86% of us are Catholic, but somehow we're always near the top of the charts for teen pregnancy. One reason is because we don't really know what's in our Bibles, but the main reason is because it only matters what it looks like. So as long as we go to church in public, we can do whatever we want in private. Of course, when she has a baby in her arms, it's pretty hard to deny what it looks like. And what's our strange attitude towards condoms? Well, we generally just don't worry about them. We're not used to them. We think all contraception is bad, and we believe that the withdrawal method works just fine, which explains why there's so many Filipinos. We've also been told that adult toys are somehow dirty, immoral, and any woman that uses them should feel like a streetwalker. Now, that's not true of all of us, and city girls are more inclined to try than provincial girls. But if that's what people say, that's what many of us believe. And because Filipinos are so concerned with what other people think, here's another thing that can affect our attitude towards you that's completely out of your control. Gossip, especially from our friends. No matter what you do or how you act, if she suddenly starts behaving oddly or begins to question things, it's often because someone's put a bug in her ear, a nasty bug. Jealous friends or neighbors will often try to sabotage you, and even without any evidence, she might give their warnings more credibility than they deserve. Not much you can do about it, so just be aware of it. Well, now that I've covered much of the behavior you might find troubling, let me mention the stuff you're gonna like. You'll be surprised at how easy it is to make a Filipina happy. It really doesn't take that much, because all we really want is to be respected and loved. If you really want to make your partner excited, just mention taking a simple trip somewhere, even just a nearby island for a day or two. We don't get to travel that much, and seeing something new is one of our biggest joys. You'll also notice our ability to stay positive in the middle of a calamity. We're eternally optimistic, and when disaster strikes, we're pretty certain things will work out, or that God will come to our aid, although He doesn't always seem to favor Filipinos. Having someone that stays upbeat can be really refreshing, knowing that no matter what happens, we'll try to make the best of it. A Filipina will also be fiercely loyal. If you have a problem, then she has a problem, and she'll do everything in her power to help you find a solution. If you're sick, you won't believe the level of care you're gonna get, enough to make you hope you never get better. It's things like this that let you know you picked the right partner, because she'll always be right by your side, even if it's just to keep the other women away. Well, that's it for this episode, and I appreciate your listening all the way to the end. I'll be back on Tuesday with a complete change of gears, so I hope to see you there. And by the way, happy Australia Day to our Aussie friends. Till then, folks. If you think about it, I'm kind of like a Hooters girl, without the Hooters, serving you exactly what you need. A double shot of hot, fresh content twice a week. The only thing I ask for my service is a thumbs up on this video, subscribing to my channel, and hitting the notification bell so you know when your next meal is ready. If you want to become one of my favorite customers, please check out my Patreon page for extra content and exclusive features. To help you decide what to order, check out this delicious assortment of great choices. Now, what can I get ya?